Family is one of the most important things a human possesses, something they can't do without even if they tried to. When a person loses their family and remains the last member standing, they are bound to seek revenge for them, especially if the perpetrator stands right before their eyes. When a person loses their family, they lose the desire to live. And when the desire to live fades away, the only remaining desire is to seek vengeance against those who caused them pain and humiliation, especially if the wrongdoer shows no remorse. Instead, they stand in front of the victim, mocking and flaunting their victory in their face. At that point, life holds no meaning other than revenge. The revenge becomes brutal, particularly when the person is mentally disturbed. In this case, the person seeks revenge not only from the culprits but from the entire society, just as happened in the Port Arthur massacre in Australia. This massacre is the worst tragedy Australia has witnessed since gaining independence and freeing itself from British colonization. But first, let's talk about Martin Bryant, the perpetrator of the horrific Port Arthur massacre that completely changed Australia. On May 7, 1967, at Queen Alexandra Hospital on Tasmania Island, Maurice and Carlin Bryant welcomed their child, whom they named Martin. The couple rejoiced in the birth of their first child. However, the joy didn't last. When Martin was 4 years old, his mother Carlin started finding his toys torn apart and scattered on the floor, causing her concern for him. She wasn't the only one concerned. Neighbors noticed that Martin exhibited disturbing behavior, the most alarming of which was an attempt to drown another child in the river. He was swimming with another child and pulled off their breathing mask, almost causing the child to drown if not for the swift intervention of adults. He also engaged in cutting down trees in the area and torturing animals. At school, he was a frequent target of bullying, often getting into fights. Teachers also noticed that Martin lacked emotions and seemed to live in a separate world from reality. He was observed talking to himself frequently and even laughing at times. The school eventually expelled him, prompting his parents to take him to a psychologist. After about a year, Martin returned to school under the doctor's recommendation, but he was placed in a special needs class due to his condition and history. However, he quickly reverted to his problematic behavior, picking fights with other students, especially those younger than him. He bullied and struck them without reason. At the age of 16, Martin dropped out of school, unable to read or write. When he was examined by a doctor, it was determined that he suffered from intellectual disability. The fact that he often spoke to himself might have been an early sign of schizophrenia. His family was advised to place him in a government care facility, but his father refused. At the age of 16, Martin spent his time at his parents' house. In contrast to many parents who physically punish their intellectually disabled children, or at best send them to government care facilities, Martin's father was a virtuous man. Martin spent his days watching TV and occasionally helped his father with gardening tasks for entertainment. His father loved him wholeheartedly, never raising a hand or shouting at him. The most severe punishment Martin ever faced was his father raising his voice. This gentle approach gradually improved Martin's mental and emotional well-being, thanks to his father's kind heart. Even the neighbors witnessed this strong bond between them. Despite the common practice in Australia of parents asking their children to move out and find a job and life of their own by the age of 18, Martin's father didn't kick him out. He didn't even ask him to find a job and continued to support him. The only job he was allowed to do was an easy and simple one that provided entertainment for Martin, mowing the neighbors' lawns for a small fee. This was especially suitable as Martin couldn't hold a regular job, making it a good option for him to engage in something enjoyable. Day by day, Martin established an arrangement with a wealthy woman named Helen Harvey, who was 54 years old. Helen lived with her 79-year-old mother. Seeing Martin's simplicity, Helen decided to offer him a complete job working at their home. He began feeding their guard dogs and cats, watering the flowers, and staying at their house. Over time, a strong bond developed between the elderly woman, her mother, and Martin. Later, Helen's mother passed away at the age of 79, leaving Helen and Martin with a deeply strong connection. Helen, being wealthy, lavished him with money to the point of buying 13 different cars just because Martin liked them. She took him shopping daily, and they would have lunch at fancy restaurants before going for walks and shopping. She covered all expenses, loving the boy for his simplicity and feeling like he would be lost without her and his family. However, she noted a chilling sentence in her diary about Martin. "Dear Lord, protect Martin from any twists in his life. This boy told me he desires to commit a massacre and kill people. It would be a disaster if this boy were left alone without his parents watching over him." Helen later purchased a 72-hectare farm and, with his father's consent, took Martin to work there. In the mornings, he would sit with Helen, keeping her company. In the evenings, he acted as a night guard, with Helen giving him an air rifle due to her fear that a real firearm would be dangerous for him, especially after he mentioned wanting to kill people. During that time, Martin fired at a group of tourists who stopped by the farm to buy apples. He also shot any barking dog and killed several animals in a cruel manner, which prompted Helen to take the rifle away from him. On October 20th, 1992, a tragic accident occurred on the highway, affecting both Helen and Martin. The accident claimed Helen's life, and Martin was critically injured, spending 6 months in the hospital. The police stated that Martin was responsible for the accident. Helen's neighbors had previously reported that Martin loved placing his hands on the steering wheel and trying to take control, even when the car was moving at high speeds. However, he wasn't arrested due to lack of substantial evidence. Nevertheless, Helen wrote a will leaving the equivalent of $363,000 to Martin, along with several properties, including part of the farm. Because of his mental condition, guardianship was transferred to his father, who became wealthy thanks to Helen's generosity. Throughout his life, Martin's father, Maurice, had dreamed of owning a family hotel on the island's beach. This dream seemed to fade after Martin's birth, especially due to the medical bills and treatments. However, a chance arose for Maurice to restart his dream with newfound wealth. In their town, there were a couple named David and Newland who decided to ruin Maurice's plan and life's dream. They learned that Maurice had plans to purchase a company called Seascape and promptly bought it. When the owner informed them that the company was already reserved, they decided to pay double the price that Maurice had offered. Maurice was deeply disappointed as Seascape was the only company willing to sell its beachfront property. Tasmania, being an active tourist island attracting thousands of Asian visitors, had very few willing to sell their land, mostly due to its tourism potential. Maurice offered the couple money in exchange for a small vacant plot of land to start his project. It wasn't about the money for him. It was about an ancient dream and aspiration. He even offered to buy the land for several times its original price. However, when they refused to sell even a square meter, he knew his dream had died. He fell into severe depression and turned to alcohol. After several months of failed negotiations with them, he hung himself. Maurice's suicide had a profound impact on Martin. His father had been his anchor in life, and Martin loved him dearly. Now he was gone. What infuriated him was that the couple continued to pass by the farm every day as if they had no remorse for their actions. They even went on to open the family hotel and advertised it around the farm where Martin's father had committed suicide. For 6 months, Martin struggled to suppress his anger. He became addicted to alcohol and attempted to forget his father, who had taken his own life because of the couple. But the couple didn't leave him alone. They rubbed their victory in his face and reminded him of his father. Although Maurice, Martin's father, had never harmed them before, they were determined to hurt him. According to local rumors, the couple mocked Maurice's suicide and even offered discounts at the family hotel to attract more visitors and provoke Martin's anger. Martin could no longer bear the torment, and he decided to take revenge for his father. In the spring of April 1996, on the 28th, Martin packed a 223 caliber semi-automatic AR-15 rifle into a gym bag. He also took with him an L1A1 rifle, which is a military sniper rifle. He brought several gallons of fuel and then got into his car and headed towards the hotel that the family had bought. He got into his car at 10 o'clock and then headed towards the hotel overlooking the port and reached it at around 12:35, entered the hotel, and killed the couple, David and Newland. At that time, people heard gunfire from the hotel, but they did not care, as this is a tourist area and one of the sports in it is hunting rabbits. So they expected that the shooting had been done by one of the hunters, so they did not care. Then a couple came and found Martin at the door of the hotel, so they thought he was the owner, so they asked him to rent. The latter was afraid that David and Newland's body would be discovered, so he said that there was no room and that they could not enter, as his girlfriend was inside the hotel, so the couple left. At first, Martin did not want to kill any innocent people, but his plan changed when he learned that the couple owned a share of a coffee shop called Broad Arrow, which was not far from the hotel. Also, his tendency to kill had begun, so he drove his car, and at exactly 1:10 he arrived at the area checkpoint and paid the entrance fee. As it is an area containing historical monuments and the cafe was next to it, he entered the area, parked his car, and went down to the cafe with the bag containing the rifle and ammunition stores on his back. He was hungry, so he decided to eat before the Port Arthur massacre began. So he ordered a sandwich from the cafe and then ate it outside due to the crowds he was in. After he finished and had his fill, he returned to the cafe and found an empty table. So he sat on it quietly, took off his bag and opened it to take out an AR-15 rifle and pointed at Moe and Neg and Sue, who were tourists from Malaysia, and they were sitting at the table behind him. These were the first 3 victims of the Port Arthur massacre. After that, he shot a man named Mick Sargent and his lover Elizabeth, who was next to him. The shot not only killed Mick as it pierced his scalp and threw him to the ground, but the shot directed at Elizabeth killed her directly. There was a New Zealand winemaker there who had come to help the coffee shop workers and brought his wife, her father, and their 15-month-old baby with him. When the massacre began, he threw a plate at Martin to distract him, while his father-in-law pinned his daughter and her child under the table to protect them. When Martin was about to kill him, a man shouted at him from behind to try to calm him down, so Martin turned and killed him. Then he started shooting everyone like crazy. The customers were lying on the floor, the women were screaming, the children were crying, and Martin was shooting them one by one. Martin went to the end of the cafe to kill those who hid under the tables, so it was a golden opportunity to get out. So the couple Marvin and Mary went out of the cafe, but Martin noticed them, so he killed them through the window. After that, he went and stood at the door of the cafe to prevent anyone from escaping, and when he found that everyone was terrified and would not think of escaping, he began to advance towards the gifts and souvenirs section. During his progress, Martin changed the ammunition store, so a man called Robert Elliott rushed to attack Martin and try to take his weapon. However, Martin managed to push him away and put a new store, then shot him in the arm and in the head, and the latter fell to the ground covered in his blood, but he did not die. And you might think that all these slow events happened in a minute or two. In fact, from the first shot to the present moment, only 15 seconds have passed. Martin was fast despite his slow mind, killing 12 people and wounding 10 others in just 15 seconds. After blood began to flow in the cafe, he went to the gift section, where people hid under the tables and behind the furniture. He went to the cash desk and killed both Nicole and Elizabeth, who were working in the gift department. Some of the visitors claimed death, and some fainted from terror, but were nevertheless shot. The couple Peter and Caroline tried to escape from it, so they ran to the back door of the gift department and found that it was closed. When Martin noticed them, the husband Peter knocked his wife to the ground and slept on top of her to protect her. Martin shot and killed him, but no bullet hit his wife, who fainted from terror. Martin then heard movement from the coffee shop, so he immediately hurried to the door that leads to it. His intuition led him to a table, and he shot at it, killing 2 men hiding under it. He went back to the gift section and found the winemaker in it, the winemaker trying to get his attention, so he wouldn't go to the table where his wife hid with their baby. So he yelled at him and begged him to stop. So Martin killed him with 3 bullets, one of which was in the head. Then he continued to the gift shop and killed everyone in it. The last of them was an Asian tourist whose identity could not be identified by surveillance cameras, where Martin directed his weapon at him. But the ammunition ran out, so he hurried and hid under the account table and put a new store. Martin then left the cafe after killing 20 people and wounding 12 others, then reached the parking lot where the tour buses stopped and saw one of them. But it was locked, and the occupants crouched inside, frightened and terrified by the sounds of gunfire. He tried to storm it and failed, but he saw the driver who had hidden with the passengers, so he shot him, wounding the driver and bleeding to death. The drivers of the other buses got out and pulled the tourists out, trying to get them to safety, but Martin started shooting at them and only managed to wound a man and a woman. At that time, he advanced to the next bus and injured a woman named Janet, who got out of the bus and tried to run away from him, but she was wounded and fell to the ground. He ran out of ammunition again, so he went to his car to get his sniper rifle and end her life. When he reached the bus in which the wounded woman was hiding, he found her husband Neville trying to help her. It was Neville's stupidity that he entered one of the buses, thinking that Martin did not notice him. So the latter entered the bus and found Neville on the ground, exhausted from fatigue. So he raised his gun and told him, "No one escapes from me," and he shot him. But because it was a heavy gun, he was unable to hit his head but his neck. He got off the bus and went to the car to get out of the cafe area, drove 600 meters, and found a woman with 2 children. This woman was called Mikak, and she had her 2 children, Madeline, who was 3 years old, and Alana, who was 6 years old. Mikak got out of the car and was about to enter the cafe a few seconds before the launch. When she heard the shooting, she ran away with her 2 children, and she was so terrified that she did not get into the car but ran 600 meters. When she saw Martin's car coming from the cafe, she thought he wanted to help her, and she stopped and started waving at him. Martin got out of the car with his gun and ordered her to get on her knees. The poor woman knew her fate, so she got down and Martin shot her in the cheek and killed her. Then he looked at the 2 girls who started crying for their mother and killed them as well. He got in his car and continued his way and saw a gold-plated BMW owned by the wealthy Salazman family. 5 people, including the private driver, were riding in it. So he stopped and got out of his car and started talking to them. The family knew that he intended to kill them. So the driver got out and tried to attack Martin, so the latter killed him quickly. Then he finished off the 3 family members, took out their bodies, moved his weapons and petrol cans to their car, then took them. He also saw another car on the road and shot it. Then he drove back to the Seascape Hotel, where he found a Toyota car on the road. So he passed it, then stopped in front of it and got out of the car with his gun. There were both Glenn and his sweetheart, Zoe, in the car. So Glenn got out of the car, raised his hands, and Martin handcuffed him, then threw him in the back trunk of the BMW that he stole. Meanwhile, the girl Zoe, who was riding next to her boyfriend, tried to go to the driver's seat to escape, and he killed her with 3 bullets. He then returned to the Seascape Hotel after shooting all the cars that passed in his path and injuring some of them. Martin arrives at the hotel, takes Glenn out of the trunk and drives him to the hotel. He tied him to the attic stairs, took out gallons of petrol, poured it all over the hotel, killed Glenn, lit the fire, and ran away. After the fire was extinguished, the police found Glenn's body on the 2nd floor staircase, as well as the bodies of David and Newland, the hotel's owners. When they reviewed the security cameras in the cafe and spoke with the witnesses, they knew the identity of the criminal. They did not need much time until they found him and arrested him. The latter did not resist arrest, but simply went with them and was sent for investigation on April 29th, less than 24 hours after he committed the Port Arthur massacre. 35 people were killed and 23 wounded in the Port Arthur massacre, and it was classified as the worst massacre in Australian history. 31 of the dead were elderly and 4 of them were children, the youngest of whom was 3-year-old Madeline, whose mother and sister were also killed by Martin. Many of the wounded were also permanently disabled, one of whom was Neville, who was quadriplegic as a result of being shot in the neck. Martin was interrogated, and when the investigator noticed his behavior, he sent him to the hospital to present his condition. Doctors discovered his history of diseases, and they also discovered that Martin had an IQ of 66. He has 16 degrees above the level of mental retardation. He was shown to several psychiatrists who followed up on his condition and then sent their conclusion to the court, who said Martin was mentally ill and slow to understand, but he was fully aware of what he was doing. Martin, during his trial, did not show any remorse for what he had done. In fact, he kept repeating the same question to the guards: "How many people did I kill? I didn't count them. So would you tell me how many I killed?" He was even proud of what he did. At that time, the judge prevented radio and newspapers from reaching his cell. He also threatened the guards that he would punish them if they told him how many people were killed in the massacre. The Australian government could not execute him due to his health condition, so he was sentenced to 1,652 years in prison without parole by an unappealable decision on charges of premeditated murder of 35 people, including 4 children, attempted murder of 23 others, and destruction of property. Today, 27 years after the Port Arthur massacre, Martin is spending the rest of his life behind bars. He has completely changed, and his condition worsened as he became fat and angry, but he still does not regret what he did, but is proud of it even though he is over 56 years old. After the horrific Port Arthur massacre, the Australian government announced a complete amendment to gun laws so that no weapon would fall into the hands of someone like Martin. The Australians then voluntarily surrendered their weapons to the government, and owning a weapon became almost impossible in Australia.